A good thorough clean and a new paint job will work wonders. It's the highest ROI activity.
You're listening to the She Renovates podcast. You're listening to She Renovates, the podcast for women who want to renovate to create an income and a life they love.
Hello. It's Bernadette speaking, and today I'm recording an audio-only solo podcast. This is the answer to an audience question, and today I'm not recording in video for the first time in a long time. Now, the question was, what would be your top 5 tips to sprucing up a rental to make it look fresh, safe, within a week without blowing your budget of around $10,000? So, no pressure. When someone joins our webinar, registers for our webinar, I always ask, is there anything you particularly want covered? And this was one of the answers. And so normally I just wind it into the content of the webinar, but I felt this needed to be treated on its own because it was a bit more in depth. And I'm sure we have investors that will get value out of this. Now, let's just talk about the constraints. 1 week and a budget of $10,000. So in terms of achieving that, normally if you want a project done quickly, you need to throw resources at it, have lots of bodies on the ground to get the work done. But of course, we can't do that because we've got a tight budget. So I'm going to do my best with this. The other thing I want to say before we get into this is you do need to be aware of the minimum standards in your state for rental properties, because they are very specific, and things like in Victoria, that bedrooms are required to have block-out curtains. Could be in New South Wales too, I can't quite remember. But anyhow, I know in Victoria, that is one of the minimum standards. So if you're looking at window dressings, then you need to make sure that they are block-out. Anyhow, let's get into it. So the first point I want to make is a good thorough clean and a new paint job will work wonders. It's the highest ROI activity. So clean from top to bottom, including steam cleaning the carpets and the curtains. Now, if the carpets are worn to such an extent that they need replacing, either with other carpet or something else, then you will do that, and you probably won't do that until after the painting. But so we won't worry too much about the order of this. We're just talking about the items. So if you're going to rip up the carpet, then you want to look at what's underneath. If the boards are good, then lucky you just have to sand and seal. Generally, that costs about $45 a square metre, unless you have some fancy finish. But $45 a square metre, you want to make sure that the floor finisher punches the nail heads and fills the gaps, and then seals with a low sheen product. The days of the glossy floors have well gone. If you can't do that, then the next step up is a floating floor. So floating floors we do for around $45 a square metre as well, including the underlay. I actually prefer a laminate with a 12mm substrate because it's nice and solid, and the one that we use is very durable and looks good too. If you decide to replace the carpet, then you're looking at something more like $60 a square metre for a pretty basic carpet with a good quality underlay. That is most important because it affects how it feels underfoot. I try to avoid having carpet in the living areas. So if I'm going to carpet anything, it'll only be the bedrooms, because I think hard floors are cleaner, easier to maintain and more durable. Now let's get on to the painting. Now, painting's going to take a fair amount of your budget. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to do it a little bit more cost effectively. Quite a few of our renovators have learnt their way around an airless spray gun, and that's a massive saving in terms of labour. Instead of having a painter work for a week painting your property, it can be done in like a day. That's after preparation. So something you can do to reduce the workload is to use the same paint on the walls and the ceilings. So generally speaking, if I was going to do that, I'd go for a white If you want a warm white, then natural white. If you want a cooler, more clinical version, then I like white on white or quarter strength lexicon. And in low sheen, like normally we do the ceilings in matte, but if we're doing walls and ceilings in the same paint, then you would go low sheen. I would strongly encourage you to spend the money on quality paint. If you go for cheap paint, it won't last as long and it will make the follow-up painting job much more difficult. The cost in painting is in the labour, and so don't skimp on the paint. Okay, so point 2, upgrade lighting. You want it fresh and bright, and for many investors or renovators, that means downlights. And I want to really discourage you from using downlights for a few reasons. One is they're not a very effective form of lighting. The second is that for every one light in a room, you need 4 lights. Now, while the lights themselves aren't that expensive, as with most things, it's labour that costs us the money. So in bedrooms, I would probably go for a pendant light. You've just got one fixing in the middle of the room, and you have the added benefit of that light being more efficient because it's hanging in the middle of the room and not shining down from the ceiling, and also adding to the style of the home. You can put something really nice that works in with the style of the home, so it adds to the aesthetic. I would also consider adding a few extra light sources around the home in order to make the lighting more effective. You might use some LED strip lighting, under cabinets, under skirtings, and so on. In bedrooms, I often like to use a fan light, so a ceiling fan combined light. It is hard to find them where the light is not ugly, but it is possible, and it is possible to do without spending a massive amount of money. And what it means is that you've got the added benefit of more comfort in the hot months. So generally speaking, you've got an air conditioner in the main living areas and fans in the bedrooms. Also, always make sure that the lights are LED. I think pretty sure these days it's standard, but I don't know. I have still seen some of those cheap, nasty halogen lights around. So now, next week, we'll get on to safety and security. Now, I'm looking at this from 2 different points. Firstly, fencing to make the yard secure for pets and children. Now, this can add up to quite a bit of money. So obviously it depends on where your budget can take you, but making the yard secure, I think, is a high value improvement. And certainly with the boundary fences, you can get your neighbours to share the cost of that. Pretty sure Colorbond's fencing is about $100 a lineal metre, so it really can add up to quite a bit of money. Also around security, a couple of a security door. I don't know that I'd go so far as a security system because that's going to blow your money right out of the water, but I'd definitely consider a security door, making sure the window locks are in good condition, and maybe some motion detector lights outside for increased safety so that the occupants know if someone's approaching the house. Next step, refreshing the bathrooms and kitchens. These rooms have a big impact on the people living in them. And so updating them a bit will make a big difference. Now, you're not going to have the money to really replace anything of any significance. So you'll need to make do with what you've got. But certainly with kitchens, you could resurface the cabinets. You might replace the countertops if they're particularly worn. Resurface or paint the cabinets and maybe replace the handles. New kitchen tap and sink possibly, and also look at the appliances. Sometimes replacing an old dated appliance has a big impact. Say installing a dishwasher. Dishwasher will cost you $500, but will probably add $5 to $10 a week to the returns. So you will have that paid back in a very short amount of time. If you're buying appliances, please make sure that they're energy efficient. The bathrooms, So once again, you're not going to have the capacity to be able to do a whole lot. Resurfacing a bathroom costs about $2,500 and can really brighten it up. Basically, you resurface the walls. You can't resurface the floor. It doesn't matter who tells you can, you can't. It just does not last. And so if the floor's not up to scratch, then you can tile over the tiles. It's a better outcome. Say replace the taps, depending on what sort of condition they're in, vanities, mirrors, and so on. A common issue in bathrooms, in investment properties, is the build-up of mould, mainly because occupants keep the room closed up in the colder months and the condensation develops and causes mould to grow. So a really important element to making over an investment property between tenants is to get that mould removed. That may even require resheeting some walls in the bathroom and installing a good exhaust fan that is wired into the lighting circuit so the property or the bathroom can't be used without the exhaust fan on. And lastly, point 5 is the landscaping and the exterior. Now, obviously, first impressions matter. So you want to make it sure it looks well cared for. So lawns get worn with children and animals, so you may need to do some reseeding or returfing. Gardens get overgrown, so trimming back overgrown shrubs and bushes, mowing the lawn, and then building up the beds. Now, I absolutely love mulch. I think it covers a multitude of sins. So with the beds, you may do some additional planting, but certainly loads of mulch will just make them look a whole lot better. If you're going to do any planting, have a look around the neighbourhood, find out what thrives, and do mass planting of 1 or 2 varieties than going for a whole range of varieties. You'll get a much better look. It'll be easier to look after. Making sure the gutters are clean and functional, check for leaking gutters and downpipes. And also see where the stormwater is going to. Many properties do not discharge into the stormwater system. Often it'll discharge under the house or on the block, which is okay, provided it doesn't get near the footings of the house. Many a house has been undermined by poorly managed stormwater runoff. And so you really want to know where that is going. Anyhow, there's just a couple of things that I want to add. So in relation to painting, often when you paint the walls and ceilings lovely crisp white, you discover that you've got ceiling and wall vents, like it might be for the air conditioner, that are a ugly discoloured yellow. And the new walls really show that up. So one thing you can do is pop them out, take them outside, give them a good clean, and then spray paint the air vents. And when they're dried, pop them back. They'll come up as good as new. Now, the other thing is the amount of storage in the home. Often there's not enough wardrobing. And a really good way to overcome this inside a tight budget is to set up an alert on Facebook Marketplace and pick up some Ikea packs, pre-loved wardrobes. The benefit of them is not just the reduced price, but also the fact that they're made up and you don't have to assemble them. Pop them into a trailer, deliver them to your site and install them. You may need to paint them to tie them in with the wall colour, but voila, you have additional storage and you can never have enough storage. So that's about it for today. I don't think I have any more to add. And I'll look forward to another episode next week. Take care.
This is the She Renovates podcast. To discover how to harness the power of renovating, check out theschoolofrenovating.com.